This time on Movie Reviews, we're going to be talking about the new 2018 film, Halloween. Halloween was directed by David Gordon Green and sees the return of Jamie Lee Curtis to the series. This is her fourth entry in the series, and it is considered a direct sequel to the first one, completely ignoring all those that came before. So we have a completely new story that's not bound by anything else except for what happened in the first film. And so the story follows 40 years after the very first film as Laurie Strode is still dealing with the ghosts of her past as she's been preparing for the night that Michael Myers will eventually escape once again and so that she can kill him. And eventually he does escape and causes mayhem throughout the town of Haddonfield, and it's up to her to finally put an end to him. This film has been highly anticipated by a lot of people, including myself. I really enjoy the Halloween movies, even the bad ones. I find just a lot of enjoyment in every single one of them. And I'm just a big fan of the franchise, and seeing that they were going to ignore all of the movies that came before except the first one, I found really interesting and wanted to kind of see what exactly we would get. Would we get a film that was better than all of those, or would we get just a retread of the original, or something completely different? Sadly, it feels more like a retread of the original film. So anyway, let's see what this film has to offer us. First off, I want to talk about the positives of the film, and there's plenty of them. First off, I think Jamie Lee Curtis is very good in this film. I love the tortured nature that they've taken Laurie Strode's character. It's really interesting, and she's pretty much a badass in this film. But she has a lot of baggage, and Jamie Lee Curtis portrays that beautifully. She is basically got PTSD, and she has a rocky relationship with her daughter, played by Judy Greer, and Judy Greer is really good in this film as the frantic daughter that had to deal with this growing up. And just seeing their relationship throughout the movie is heartbreaking, as well as you understand where Judy Greer is coming from in the film and why she's been so distant from her mother. It's a really good dynamic that I think really works in the film. Also, I think this film looks really good. The cinematography is slick and smooth, but also very gritty at times. I think the best sequence where the cinematography really shines is honestly the opening scene of the film that takes place at Smith Grove, and it's just beautifully shot, and just the set decor and everything about that set looks incredible. You've probably seen it in the trailer where the inmates are all on this checkerboard kind of area of the sanitarium, and it's just a wonderfully filmed scene, as well as a particular scene near the middle of the film where Michael Myers has already escaped and he's on a killing spree, where the film decides to follow Michael through several houses in a single take, and we see him just murdering, and it's the best shot of the entire film. It looks really good, and being able to follow behind Michael as he does all these things is a very interesting perspective that I really enjoyed. I also like the dynamic between the sheriff character and Laurie Strode. This is really good. I can't remember the actor's name that plays him, but he was in the Mothman Prophecies, and he was really good in that film, and he's really good here. They have a history together that is very interesting and ties into the first film a little bit. And That's really good. All around, the performances are really good from everybody. David Gordon Green has gotten some really good performances out of his actors, and he's shown that he's a really good talent behind the camera. Also, we can't forget about the music to this film. The music was made by John Carpenter along with his godson and his son, and it's really good. It's very John Carpenter like. I guess that's a new word, but it just has that feeling of the original Halloween films with doing something a little bit different. I really like this particular soundtrack, especially this particular song where there's this guitar riff that feels just so much like a John Carpenter score. It's a really good score throughout the entire film and really elevates a lot of scenes. Also, I was happy to see that they did the opening credit sequence, like from the first two films. This was so satisfying to see, and it just really helps with making that connection to the first one, seeing as this is supposed to be a direct sequel now. I really loved that opening sequence. It just made me really giddy. Now, there is a part in the film, almost at the third act mark, where a certain thing happens with a certain character and a decision is made. And a lot of people, I don't think, are going to like this decision. I'm not going to say it because it gets into spoiler territory, but there's a decision that's made that would have taken the film in a completely different direction, and I really, really liked it. I thought it was incredibly different, that we would get something just so different from the original Halloween, or something completely different than we got in any of the other Halloween sequels, but they don't go through with it, and so that's where that's going to be a little bit inside my negatives of the film, which we'll do a little bit later. But also, I want to talk about some of the little Easter eggs of the film. Throughout the film, there are little references here and there to previous films, whether it's where a certain scene is taking place, just certain things that are on screen that are very similar to other scenes from other Halloween movies, and I really like that. I particularly love that they showed the silver shamrock masks from the third Halloween movie, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I thought that was really fun to see because those masks are really good. Also, I really loved the trick-or-treat scene because it was that one moment in the film where this really felt like a Halloween movie. Just seeing a bunch of kids dressed up in their Halloween costumes, trick-or-treating, it brought me back to my childhood when I would trick-or-treat and go to different houses. It was a very well done scene. And after this is where I'm going to get a little bit into my negatives that I have with the film, and there's plenty of negatives that I do have. First off, I think the film is a little too meta. I really like the script to this movie. It works in a lot of ways, but sometimes the film does get a little too meta. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's certain scenes, like you've seen in the trailer, where they're like, wasn't Michael Myers Laurie's sister? And they're like, oh no, that was a name they just made up. And I was like, oh, because they're doing that because they're not having them being brother and sister. It was just kind of forced in there, and there's a couple scenes like that. There's also a moment where there's a doctor in the film that they just say, oh, you're the new Sam Loomis. And it seems like that, and just dialogue like that kind of takes me out of the film. Also, there's no atmosphere in this film. I think this film has some pretty scary moments, but there's nothing quite like the original with certain sequences, and the atmosphere is just gone. The only moments where they have like real atmosphere is the opening sequence as well as that trick-or-treating scene, which just is amazing. But other than that, it just feels like a very stale movie at times. At times, it does feel like John Carpenter is behind the camera. It feels like David Gordon Green did do his homework with some stuff, but there's some stuff here that just doesn't work. Also, a huge problem with this film is that it feels very episodic. It never feels like a cohesive story. It feels like a bunch of different movies or sequences just strung together. Like, the very beginning of the film deals with these podcasters as they're trying to learn about the Myers case. There's that story, then there's the Laurie story, then there's her granddaughter's story, and never does it really flow together into a narrative that quite works like the original film. It's just a very messy kind of story. Also, as I said before, there was a particular scene in the third act that I really liked, and it does something completely different, takes it in a completely new direction, but they don't go through with it. It's basically just a 5-minute detour that in the end means absolutely nothing. And that's a problem that's throughout the film, is they will set up certain things and then they don't do anything interesting with it. And I hate that, because that's what makes this film feel so much like a retread of the original, or trying not to stray too far from the original, and instead it doesn't give us anything different. Also, I love that they continue to make Michael Myers this mysterious figure that we can't completely understand, but I feel like in certain ways they still make him a bit too human. But it's not completely a problem that I have with the film. That's more just a little nitpick. Overall, does this film have a reason for existing? Does it do something so different, or does it warrant its own existence? And not really. It does do some really good things in the film, but it never does something to the point where I'm glad this exists. It's just an alright film with some great cinematography, some good acting, and it just is the best Halloween movie we have gotten since the original, and that's the biggest thing about this film, is at least it's better than a bunch of the other sequels, but it doesn't do anything to warrant its own existence, which in a way is a little disappointing. So anyway, with all that said, Halloween 2018 slides by with a 7 out of 10. Throughout the film, I was almost into 6 territory, but I did enjoy this film just enough, and there's definitely a lot of problems the film has, but I think it makes up for it in some really good cinematography, some great horror moments, some just great sequences in general, and some really good acting. And it's directed and written by a very talented director. Anyway, guys, that's all I got to say. So, with all that said, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next review.